Mark Rogers TV back with you and on to the 12th rated schedule in the Big Ten. It belongs to the Northwestern Wildcats. And right off the bat, I commend Northwestern for facing two difficult games non-conference. So, if you've heard my schedule posts in the past, I've run through the ACC and the entire SEC, so that's 28 schools. I've knocked out two in the Big Ten. I hate programs that do not schedule out of conference. Wink, wink, Baylor. And there are plenty of others. Mississippi State, Ole Miss this season, despite taking on Texas and Boise State in recent years. Ole Miss taking 2015 off. But Northwestern, starting with a date at home against Stanford. Good scheduling. Love it. 2 weeks later, they've got a date at Duke to take on the Blue Devils. Lightly regarded overall, but real college football fans that know Duke football over the past 3 years, 3 consecutive postseason appearances, 19-8 the past 2 years under David Cutcliffe. They've got a strong team, and for Northwestern, that is a very difficult game on the road. I believe both of these are home-and-home series. So Northwestern, one of the few teams in the country, there's probably 15 out of the Power 5 that play 2 difficult non-conference Power 5 games. Stanford at Duke 2 weeks later. The other 2 Northwestern games would be what you would expect out of a Big Ten team in playing a lower grade other 2 conference games, Eastern Illinois in their own backyard and Ball State playing in Muncie, Indiana. So those are the first 4 games for Northwestern. Well, why is this the 12th rated schedule in the country if they're playing 2 very difficult Power 5 teams out of conference? Well, they play in the West, so most of the Eastern schedules with Michigan State and Ohio State in play, to a lesser degree Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, Michigan, some decent schools behind the big 2. The East tougher than the West, so that's a huge factor. Their non-division games are Michigan and Penn State. Those are 2 pretty tough games. We will have to see if Michigan is a 9 or 10 win team, or if it's going to take Jim Harbaugh some time. At this point, we're looking at Michigan at 5-7 last season with similar personnel this year. Penn State was only 6-6 regular season before a bowl win over BC. So those are 2 mid-tier games in the Eastern Division. So they avoid Ohio State and Michigan State, but they do get, again, Michigan and Penn State out of the Eastern Division. And the West is a fairly light touch outside of Wisconsin, Nebraska, and Minnesota. So this is the toughest stretch. Aside from that 2 out of 3 week stretch to start the season against Stanford and Duke on the road, a couple weeks later, Northwestern dives into Big Ten play with a game at home against Minnesota, followed by a game at Ann Arbor, Iowa, Nebraska, and Penn State. So that's 5 consecutive football games against strong teams, Minnesota, Michigan, Iowa to a lesser extent, Nebraska, and Penn State. So I have been impressed with the Big Ten scheduling out of conference for the most part. For the most part, there's a few softies in there. And again, it would be my ideal in a perfect world, and I will break down the scheduling formula at some point, to play a tough Power 5 conference team, a mid-tier Power 5 conference team, and then somebody from the non-Power 5, the other 5, Sun Belt, MAC, etc., and then have at it for a scrimmage with the FCS or whatever other than that. So Northwestern pretty much fulfills this task right here in taking on Stanford and Duke. Again, non-division games against Michigan and Penn State. It's the 12th rated Big Ten schedule. Need to hear from you now on Mark Rogers TV.